What if some non-speaking autistic children were communicating with their parents, not through words, gestures, or expressions, but directly, mind to mind? Over the past few years, families around the world have shared experiences they struggle to explain. Moments that seemed less like ordinary communication and more like thoughts being exchanged, even though the children never spoke a word. These stories emerged independently from families separated by thousands of kilometers. Some see them as evidence of something extraordinary. Others believe more conventional explanations may exist. Whatever the answer, one thing is undeniable: the question refuses to disappear. To understand why, we need to travel back more than a century to Victorian England, where a Cambridge scholar became fascinated by a mystery most of his contemporaries dismissed. Frederic William Henry Myers was no fringe mystic. He was a respected classicist, poet, and scholar at Cambridge University, living at a time when science was transforming the world. Yet fascination with the unseen remained widespread. Most people chose one of two extremes: blind belief or outright ridicule. Myers accepted neither. If intelligent, honest people repeatedly reported unusual experiences, he believed they deserved careful investigation. In 1882, Myers joined philosophers, physicists, and fellow scholars to found the Society for Psychical Research in London. Their goal was simple: to investigate extraordinary claims using scientific methods. It was Myers who coined the word telepathy, giving a name to the possibility of one mind communicating directly with another. Whether he was right or wrong is almost beside the point. He gave a name to a question that has never truly gone away. As the decades passed, mainstream scientific interest in ESP faded, and many research programs closed. For a time, it seemed the question had been left behind. But history had other plans. During the Cold War, reports of Soviet interest prompted secret investigations by several United States agencies. Scientists, military personnel, and civilian contractors explored remote viewing and related phenomena. Thousands of pages of those programs have since been declassified. Some believed they had uncovered something worth investigating. Others remained unconvinced. But one thing is clear: the question never disappeared. It simply resurfaced in a very different place. Not in government laboratories, but in the homes of families raising non-speaking autistic children. At the center of this new chapter is Dr. Diane Hennacy Powell. Unlike many people associated with controversial subjects, Powell did not build her career investigating paranormal claims. Quite the opposite. A Harvard-trained physician specializing in psychiatry and neuroscience, she spent years studying the mind through conventional clinical practice. Those who know her describe her as calm, measured, and thoughtful. She seems far more interested in asking careful questions than offering dramatic conclusions. That curiosity would eventually take her somewhere she never expected. Working with autistic patients and their families, Powell became increasingly interested in consciousness itself. Not telepathy, consciousness. She became fascinated by how we experience the world, how we communicate, and what may be happening inside a mind that cannot easily express itself through spoken language. Then something unexpected happened. Emails began arriving. At first, only a few, then more followed. Families from around the world described experiences they couldn't explain. They weren't looking for publicity. They were looking for someone willing to listen. Children who couldn't communicate through speech sometimes appeared to know things they had no obvious way of knowing. A conversation in another room or a photograph only someone else had seen. Taken alone, any one account might be coincidence. Together, they demanded a closer look. She knew how easily the human mind finds patterns. She knew memory is imperfect. She knew expectation can shape perception. What followed would become one of the most unexpected journeys of her career. If these reports were to have any scientific value, they would have to withstand careful scrutiny. So Powell went to the families herself. She listened, she observed, she tested, and the more she investigated, the harder the reports became to dismiss. What followed became the foundation of what many people now know as the Telepathy Tapes, and it is here that the story takes an extraordinary turn. Before we look at the experiments, it's worth understanding these children. Many of the children featured in the Telepathy Tapes are non-speaking autistic individuals. That doesn't mean they have nothing to say. It means they cannot communicate through spoken language. For many families, that reality is heartbreaking. Imagine knowing your child understands far more than they can express. You see intelligence, humor, and emotion, yet struggle to find a way to reach them. Over time, some families turn to a simple tool known as a letterboard. By pointing to letters one at a time, some children were able to form words, sentences, and sometimes entire conversations. Then something even more unusual began to happen. A parent might be shown a photograph while the child remained in another room. The child reportedly began spelling the image. In other demonstrations, a researcher silently selected a number. Again, the child appeared to identify that same number without it ever being spoken aloud. There were also accounts of children apparently responding to thoughts that parents insisted had never been expressed aloud. Some families came to believe communication was taking place directly from one mind to another. Powell spent years investigating these reports, repeatedly refining the testing conditions to see whether conventional explanations could account for what she was witnessing. The debate continues. But just when it seemed the story couldn't become any more unusual, many of the children began describing the same place, a place they simply called the Hill. It sounds almost mythical. According to families interviewed, a number of non-speaking autistic children described what appeared to be the same place, not a physical location, but a shared landscape of the mind. What makes these accounts so remarkable is that children from different families, cities, and even countries reportedly described strikingly similar experiences. Parents said their children spoke of meeting one another there, communicating effortlessly, and recognizing children they had never met in everyday life. Some described a place where spoken language was unnecessary, where thoughts flowed naturally between minds. Others spoke of learning, playing, and comforting one another. For many parents, these accounts were deeply moving. They felt they were seeing, for the first time, an inner world that had long remained hidden behind the barrier of speech. Whether the Hill reflects imagination, an aspect of consciousness we do not yet understand, or something else entirely remains an open question. But perhaps that isn't what resonates most, because ultimately these stories are about more than telepathy. They are about connection, and the possibility that consciousness may be far richer and more mysterious than we have yet begun to understand. Around the same time, these discussions were reaching a wider audience, another intriguing story emerged. It came from a man named Jordan Jozak. Jordan has spoken publicly about experiences he says began during childhood when he attended a specialized educational program exploring unusual aspects of perception and human potential. Among the exercises he remembers were intuition, extrasensory perception, and what he describes as early forms of remote viewing style training. But one experience stood apart. Jordan recalls being shown what he describes as a mysterious orb, an encounter that stayed with him, not because it answered questions, but because it raised them. Today, he speaks about those experiences with remarkable restraint, offering them not as proof, but simply as memories that invite us to consider the possibility that consciousness may be more mysterious than we yet understand. Perhaps that is the real story, not telepathy, not proof, but curiosity. Frederic Myers, J.B. Rhine, Diane Hennacy Powell, and Jordan Jozak all arrived at this mystery from very different directions. A Cambridge scholar, a Harvard-trained psychiatrist, and one man's childhood experience. Yet each found themselves confronting the same enduring question. What is consciousness? How much do we truly understand? Whatever the answer ultimately proves to be, one thing seems certain. The families who shared their experiences were real. The researchers who chose to investigate them were real. Perhaps that is science at its very best, not defending what it already knows, but having the humility to explore what it does not. If this has given you something to think about, I'd genuinely love to hear your perspective in the comments below. Because conversations like these don't move forward through certainty, they move forward through curiosity.